Welcome back to the Nautical Chronicle. For those who attended the giant Geo stream about half hour ago, I salute you for returning once again for another live stream here on the Closeton YouTube channel. Um, I'm I'm graciously hosting the one, the only Dave the Distributist. How are you doing,
Hello,
Dave?
hello. Good. People are probably aware that I'm in the middle of a move, which is why I have not been podcasting. It's very difficult to find any time for blogging. This is the first time I've used for blogging in the last month, at least. I published an article that I had written previously just before the move, and nothing's happened since then because all the stuff has been in boxes. So hopefully I can repost this to keep the keep the content monsters from the door, and
Like I know exactly how you were feeling. Like I ended up you know on top of my 40-hour a week job, I ended up picking up a side hustle that ended up being like 20 hours a week of work, and plus catching the live stream bug again. So
yeah.
now
Wait till you have a kid.
wait, yeah, I'm working on it, but
Yeah.
it's it's a good, I guess it's a good thing to keep you, I guess. One of the things that I appreciate growing up, growing older, is the fact that there are certain things in life um, that you can just stick a pin in and say, "This is a solid thing that I need to do in X amount of time," and time constraints kind of, I guess, they make the work week go by both faster and with a little bit more intensity. That I don't know. It's hard to explain how.
Yeah, you need to
Um,
have constraints. You
yeah.
need to have goals.
So I'm once again painting the USS Bogue. It's a little escort carrier. Before going live, you asked if it was what, like
If there is
for.
an intended war game, because I've seen people do naval war games with boats that size.
Yeah, like there's like an Age of Sail like war game, but those are like, this is about like 7 inches long. Like those tiny things are like a third of the size, and
Ah,
it's if you've ever seen like was it like the 8 millimeter tall like epic games,
mhm.
like minis, they're like, it's
Oh
like
yeah, I
playing with
love those. Yeah.
it's like playing with grains of rice.
Yep.
um
Yep. I've seen many person play Napoleonic campaigns on those things. I never actually played with myself, but historicals have always seemed to be sort of the purest form of wargaming and modeling in
I
a
mean
lot of ways.
that is, if you want to go with like, I believe it was H.G. Wells who created
Yeah, it was.
what was it called, like a small tiny soldiers something or another, like the
Yeah,
first codified board game.
the war game, the legend goes that he developed it for a friend who had been paralyzed during World War I, who was looking for something to occupy his time. Uh, that's at least what the
Little
urban
Wars.
legend is. But it was H.G. Wells who developed the
Mhm.
first tabletop war game,
Yeah,
including the incredibly large number of rules, which occupied an entire like volume book.
well, I came across this copy of Little Wars at like a used bookstore, and it was only like 50 pages long, and like little kids, uh like font for like little kids. So I'm not sure what the original ended up being, but what I came across seemed minimalistic. Um,
Yeah, I mean so it was written by the one written by H.G. Wells. I think I lost you.
and of that is a certain habit that you have.
Oops. Am I am I holding down the fort here? Well, I may indeed be. For those on Clossington's channel, I am Dave Greene, even though I don't have a camera on me. So, although I don't really have a very prepared talk, I think Clossington was talking about his 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 ship modeling, and I have never painted a model ship, although 5 years ago I did paint an army of model orcs for Warhammer, which I have then went on to never play with. But the skills were put to use painting many other model board games that came with little figures. And you're back. Hello?
Let's see.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I think I've been able to hear you.
Yeah, Dave, can you
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Dave?
I can hear you. Okay.
All right, I can hear you again.
Okay, great.
My one of the things about moving into a new place is that you forget where the router is, and sometimes you accidentally kick the router. And yes, I can hear you. So the reason why I asked you to come out here is because there are two sort of events that popped up onto my social media feed that I guess are within your wheelhouse. And it involves the complete collapse of, I guess, the old guard of Breadtube.
Yeah.
So this is the two events being, the cancellation of ContraPoints and the devolution of the Ethan Klein versus Hassan Piker. Yes, their whole, I forget what their podcast was, the leftovers and the disgrace of one iDubbbz. It's all very unfortunate, but it's almost like an end of an era where the OG video essayists are almost now an endangered species, while the podcasters on Twitch seem to be making a considerable bit of money. And I wanted to, I guess, pick your brain about how we ended up getting to this point.
Well, I think the end of the era was COVID. I think that ContraPoints hasn't been relevant since 2021, or any of the people. I mean, I guess the sort of there is sort of an echo. I mean, maybe I should start from a beginning to the end. I don't know how exactly you want me to tackle this massive topic. I have a bunch of names written down, but Breadtube was always it was not comprised of people who had things to say and then got online to say them. That was how the right wing started. That's how I started my YouTube channel, is that people were saying things. I was like, oh my God, you're so wrong. I need to correct this idea. And then I started making videos. And strangely enough, I mean, I had to blog for 3 years before that where I talked about general cultural war issues. But the only time I got traction was essentially criticizing Sargon of Akkad's, like, basically 1.0 incarnation. But that was the story of most people. Even Sargon, Carl Benjamin, got his start because he had something to say, and then he came online and said it. For Breadtube, it was very much different in the sense that this was there was a market for this kind of thing, and then the people came on to fill that market, and they changed with the market, and the market then evaporated in essentially the year directly following COVID. Although, you could see the beginning of the end emerging in 2019. And I actually made a kind of semi-prophetic series of essays before my son was born called "The End of an Era," where I kind of prophesized the end of the video essay, and indeed it happened, and it happened for a lot of reasons, and arguably it ended Breadtube more than it ended the right wing. It was in some sense more impactful for Breadtube than it was for the right wing. The right wing got killed because half the content creators were censored off major platforms.
Well, so, I in terms of I guess a general timeline, in terms of what YouTube was and what it is now. I recall there was a certain meta of YouTube where you had your original meta where clicks mattered most, and so you ended up with like a lot of like clickbait, flash animation.
Originally, the meta was dominated by the fact that it was only 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
And so that's how you had the prominence. I mean, we can't not list this era of YouTube. I mean, the first era of YouTube and of blogging. And first, it needs to be said that the internet originally was essentially just a left-wing phenomenon. I mean, there were a few corners of the internet. I was an early reader of UR. I was an early reader of Steve Saylor. I was on these sites along with apparently people like Curtis Yarvin, right? So there was a right-wing section of the internet. But this was not like the internet proper that you'd find on social media. Right-wing ideas were almost absent from the Web 2.0 revolution. It took them almost a decade to catch up. And in that period, you know, YouTube was dominated by millennials that were only dabbling in on politics on the side. And because, you know, YouTube in particular was only 10 minutes long, these are things like Channel Awesome, nostalgia videos, and you get politics sprinkled in on the side of that. The Spoony one was someone people were talking about recently too, which was a huge influence on me. And in the wake of that, you also have...
I hope that's the most complimentary thing. I hope you mean in a very complimentary way. A lot of people don't. Well, a lot of people talk about Spoony once in a very and talk about his downfall.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't.
In his personal presentation, in earnestness.
I mean, Spoony one was he's the person who suffered. I mean, I don't want to get sidetracked. He was the person that suffered from bipolar disorder, very obviously, and he couldn't keep his mental health in check. And obviously, but what people loved about him was the fact that he'd get on and he'd speak extemporaneously about all of these types of nostalgic topics. And if you were a millennial of my age, you would remember feeling very much the same way about any number of things in the transition that we had from the 1990s to the 2000s. And that's what made him popular. And, but these were like, you know, the original like political YouTube. So there was the Amazing Atheist, and there are people like Steve Shives. These were nostalgia reviewers that dabbled in politics. And I guess the Amazing Atheist there are atheists who dabbled in politics. And then there are people like the Young Turks. And the Young Turks' goal was just to do like MSNBC, but more leftist and on social media and not online. They were very much just trying to copy the mainstream media model. And you know, this was the internet environment going into the 2010s, in which and the 2010s is really the era that we remember as being the era of the political YouTube essay. Like it does before that, it couldn't possibly happen. Well, before 2014, it basically couldn't happen. And then after that, after COVID, it became almost irrelevant.
And I remember in that sort of time frame, there were 3 changes to the meta, where first, you know, prioritizing clicks and clickbait. And then there was a weird era where the algorithm prioritized length, like duration. And so you ended up with like this flood of like Minecraft and like gaming YouTubers. And then eventually the around like the mid-10s, the meta changed where the algorithm only really helped you as long as your video content was over like 12 and a half minutes or something like that.
Yeah, and it had to be uploaded too. The live streams would do terribly.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you could make an essay, like someone could make a trivial point and you could do a response essay to them. And that response essay would actually do very well, granted that it was uploaded. And, you know, it didn't really make sense to do streams because streams did terribly.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of political content, you know, the sort of heyday ended up being like the late 10s until I think a combination of alternatives like was like Twitch came along that
the streaming phenomenon happened. That was the first thing. Then COVID happened, and it became when streaming started dominating the logic of making the edited videos cease to, like, I remember thinking that back in the day. I was like, I spent, like 4 or 5 times as long to make this edited video essay, and it got half the views of the live stream where I just turned the camera on and spoken to the little potato. And then in addition to that, people gave me super chats, right? So I mean, like, I do like the video essay, but then Substack came around, right? And all of a sudden, people were hungry for long form content, and as long as it was written down, and people would cite it more. That was like, Substack essays have a longer shelf life, it seems, too.
So I think the impetus for there being a video essayist, left-leaning Breadtube economy came from, I guess, the algorithm promoting content just long enough to retain viewers. That's over 12 and a half minutes or whatever it was. There's the fact that they could easily cash in on like Patreon as a payment, as a means of getting paid, as well as institutional backing where alternative, I guess, center or right-wing opinions ended up being arbitrarily censored on the various platforms.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, but you left out the critical component to this, because I don't think the Breadtube was generated. I mean, Breadtube,
you're talking about like institutional backing.
Yeah, but Breadtube benefited from the algorithmic changes that had happened that led to the video essay being popular. But video essays were not natively what they wanted to produce. And the only reason why the left even dipped its toes into this is because the right wing started taking over YouTube and the video essay making sphere generally. I mean, that was Breadtube was very much a reaction to I mean, they all were Bernie bros or whatever, but like, you wouldn't, all of the popular, I mean, like, we probably should, like, the first, can you think of an earlier purely Breadtube personality than ContraPoints? Maybe H
yes.
Bomber guy.
I was going to say like Anita Sarkeesian and Lindsay Ellis.
Okay, I mean, Lindsay Ellis was part of the whole Spoonie one, like, nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
Like, Lindsay Ellis became
nostalgia chick or whatever her.
She was literally a Miss Male character for Doug Walker, the nostalgia critic, and Channel Awesome. Very much, and nobody watched Lindsay Ellis for her political opinions. She developed them later during the Great Awakening, like everyone else did, and she was part of that. But that was not what her brand was. Her brand was always nerd culture and nostalgia culture. And what was the other one? Anita Sarkeesian. Again, Anita Sarkeesian is a very artificial character. There is no organic fan base for Anita Sarkeesian. She had more haters than she ever had fans. She had a lot of institutional monetary backing. Her Patreon went bonkers. But Anita Sarkeesian had, like, I can't find, I live in very progressive areas. I can't find Anita Sarkeesian fans. They might have heard about her because she was covered on CNN or whatever. But there wouldn't be, people wouldn't like, oh wow, the latest Anita Sarkeesian video is there. Like, let's tune in, right? And this is so I really think that you can't explain Breadtube other than being kind of an anti-right wing space. That's the only way that they really make sense, and that's one of the reasons why they died as well. No more right-wing video essayists means that the motivating impetus for them being there drained away. The other thing about the video essay for the Breadtuber is it also prevented them from having to get into conversations with right-wingers, which was something, the left has always struggled to find a good way to talk to the right wing. It's always kind of even if they do a good job in debates, it's obviously you could say, oh, well, what about Destiny? And that's a different story.
That ends up being sort of interesting into where Breadtube ended up on Twitch, where was it like Destiny created this formula for this rhetorical formula for covering like a very tight frame game, very he has a small team of fact checkers and like very biased fact checkers. They're checking his points like live to make sure that he doesn't mess up too much.
But Destiny would have a very difficult time in the video essay format. That needs to be clear. And the reason why is because you could. So in the video essay format, the arguments stood a little bit apart from the viewer. So, like, let's say, for instance, that Sargon makes a video debunking Anita Sarkeesian or whatever. Well, then Christy Winters can come and debunk Sargon, right? And then I can come and I can debunk Christy Winters. And like, it's just this video back and forth. And so what you end up is like a long chain of conversations. But the problem is that the arguments kind of stand a little bit too distinct from any individual frame. Like, I can come and I can totally reframe Christy Winters or, you know, whatever. Who did I respond to back in the day? I did a ContraPoints response. I actually had a debate with ContraPoints, amazingly, before they learned that didn't work out for them. And so the thing is, like, that Destiny's formula doesn't work in that environment, because then there'd have to be like a Destiny argument, and then different people could debunk that or could talk about it or point to it in the abstract.
The fact that there's like no there.
Exactly. It's what I call like the view from nowhere, right? Like, this is what the Amazing Atheist did too. I mean, Amazing Atheist built his career around attacking conservatives and attacking religious people. But there's no the Amazing Atheist worldview. That doesn't exist. There's no Destiny worldview. He has like affiliations. He is moderate left. He is liberal. I don't know what I'd call a social democrat. I mean, he basically just Democrat, moderate Democrat.
Like some sort of social democrat, you know, not particularly ideologically though.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no ideology. It's more the politics of feelings. You know, people should have XYZ. Why doesn't the government cover XYZ? These right wingers don't know what's best for them, and they're, you know, obstructing what's in their best interests.
I'm a good example of this. Like, you know, let's talk about some of the things that put. I mean, we're jumping around very radically.
Sure.
But you know, if we were going to jump straight from when Breadtube started in 2016, which was the emergence of the first organic Breadtuber, which is ContraPoints, which started their channel the same month that I did in 2016, and you know, was amazingly successful, unlike yours truly. You know, but fast forward to sort of the height of the video essay in 2018, and this is where Destiny starts sort of pulling ahead of the pack, and he pulls ahead of the pack for like basically what we used to say, like, well, I'm dating myself as an older millennial, but what we used to like poning people. Like, his first really big breakout thing that I remember him being known for was destroying JonTron on the subject of HBD. Right now, it was really important that Destiny owned JonTron. Like, the particular, like, the finer points of HBD are obviously like, that's not relevant.
Manifestly and true.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, like, everyone knows, like, the New York Times is admitting at this stage that this is that the assertions that progressives usually make about you know, the interchangeability of certain populations is that's not factual. There's no evidence to support it, and there's an enormous amount of evidence against it. But like, Destiny was not known as the anti-HBD guy. He was known as the guy who owned JonTron. That's what he was known for, right? And you'll see this in a variety of situations where Destiny wins the debate on an issue that is obviously like the losing side of an issue, but his fans don't care. His fans only care that he just has this like inassailable kind of personal presence, and he always plays a tight frame game. And this is what I'm saying, like, there's sort of a market for these Breadtubers before there is actually something that they need to say. And, you know, ContraPoints is a perfect example of this. ContraPoints was, I mean, the original idea of the ContraPoints channel was that it was an anti-alt-right channel. And all of the original ContraPoints videos were iterations of this anti-alt-right perspective, all of which are deleted now, by the way. The oldest YouTube video that you
I
can
don't think
find
they
from
particularly age well.
no, they don't. And they actually made a video about me. And if that video had stayed up on that channel, on their channel, it would be the most viewed thing I ever made, right? But it didn't, right? And I downloaded. You can watch ContraPoints attempt to debunk me in wearing a nun's costume if you want to. That artifact, that text exists out there, and it makes absolutely no sense in our own time. It could have only been made in 2017,
Mhm.
and no other year would that video have ever been made. So
I
yeah,
have a couple points for you. I
Sure,
feel
sure.
like you shouldn't cut yourself so short about not being as successful as ContraPoints. You seem to show up to you seem to be able to produce more content.
Oh
Certainly,
yeah,
per year,
and
you
look,
end up going to IRL events to over 100 adoring fans.
I wouldn't change places with ContraPoints for
No,
all the money in the world, and not least of which because I still have my gonads. But
I mean that's its own hell.
yeah,
To,
exactly. But I mean, ContraPoints is like it's almost worth a video in itself because ContraPoints was the archetype of the pure breadtuber. So like when I say breadtuber, I don't usually mean like Destiny and Destiny clones. What I usually mean are the people like H Bomber Guy and Thought Slime and Big Joel, like the video essayists, right?
yeah,
Like
there's
those,
a like here on it's like WikiTube or whatever it is.
yeah,
You know,
I mean,
popular.
Bosch is the obvious Destiny clone. He's kind of like an intermediary species between the debate bro. I mean, Demon Mama is another one that recently got blown up. Keffels was kind of another one.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
she's
I
right
mean,
here. Yep.
it's interesting. There's another news item that kind of came up recently about. Okay, I mean, here's another blast from the past that came out of this. But Brianna Wu will be a figure that stands behind all of these creators. This is a name that will come up again and again as an element of dark money, and almost all of the minor channels in the Breadtube circuit eventually get drawn into being directly or indirectly funded by Brianna Wu, specifically through the pack called Progressive Victory, which most recently tried to re-elect Jamal Bowman, who was I don't know if you you remember the guy. Jamal Bowman was that idiot who pulled the fire alarm.
Oh no,
Yeah.
he's going to Congress.
Oh yeah, and well, I don't know. I think he won, but like all of the lefty breadtubers that remained went all in on getting him elected and pushing this person into office. Complete idiot, complete grift. Brianna Wu is, a person that is just one of the more dishonest people who's ever interacted in politics online. They're a complete chameleon. They go from being a game developer to being a pack organizer. They go from being a progressive to being a moderate. They completely blend into whatever is needed to promote whatever they're doing. Just a very, very, very. But it's. And everyone can see this, but they all get involved with this person towards the end because they're passing bills around.
So in the audience, Capitulissimo asks who Brian Wu.
Brian Wu.
So Brianna Wu is a certain notorious. Well, just to give a little bit of background information, it's a certain notorious unethical games journalist from ye old Gamergate era.
Exactly.
A particularly slimy and unethical figure who radicalized a whole generation, and slinked out of the limelight only to reappear as a DNC, super PAC operative.
Yeah,
bankrolling various causes,
which they might have always been. There's a possibility that this dark money has been there for the entire time. Although, I wouldn't put it past it. Perhaps Brianna was just getting new jobs because they change to fit whatever the circumstances, whatever is paying the bills, right? But I mean, ContraPoints is kind of the most interesting case because, it is very obvious that there's two sources for these types of breadtubers. The first source is like the nerd culture nostalgia scene that you came from Channel Awesome and people who were trying to copy Channel Awesome. The people who were trying to copy Angry Video Game Nerd or Noah Antweiler, aka the Spoony One. People were trying to copy them. And then there is like the atheists. And these almost all the characters from this scene come from one of those two schools of thought. There are no people. I mean, there's a third category a little bit, and those are academics. These are people who come from an academic background. They don't have very much success getting finances, and so they kind of moonlight as YouTubers. Christy Winters is a good example of this. What was that guy, the Sideburns guy that recently got, I forget, was it Extra Credits? Was that the YouTube channel they were part of?
That was shoot. It was I know who you're talking about. It's the alt-right playbook guy, right?
No. The alt-right playbook guy is that's another good one. The alt-right playbook guy is I'm gonna look this up. Innuendo Studios.
Innuendo Studios, yeah.
Yeah, that's a different person. Innuendo Studios is very much along the lines of the people who came out. I mean, these guys all look the same. They all look the same. They all are these millennials. They have these huge beards. They're balding and they kind of talk in the same way. Like it's a very apologetic way of talking like this. It's a very weird thing. And Innuendo Studios is very much along the lines of ContraPoints in that they were almost entirely known as being an anti-alt-right video channel. And this is what's so funny is that we're talking about ContraPoints, we're talking about ThoughtSlam, we're talking about H-Bomber Guy, we're talking about Big Joel. These if you added up all of the views from all of the alt-right channels that ever went on YouTube, they wouldn't equal one of these guys at their height. What they were pulling in from views and subscribers and all this stuff. So like the market for being against the alt-right, just in terms of pure metrics and money that you could get from it, dwarfed the amount of money you could get for being even like an unbanned alt-righter during their glory days in early 2017. This is what's so fun. Like I said before, Breadtube is a market in search of people to operate in it. It's not the people have very little to say outside of it, right? And afterwards, so by the time 2019 rolls around, the alt-right's just getting banned off of social media. There isn't, and so Innuendo Studios is still making like anti-alt-right playbook videos, which are just basically like anti-conservative videos at that stage. But there's no one to react to anymore that's organic. And so a lot of these guys, especially after the Biden election, ContraPoints just stops making videos, essentially. They make one video a year, and the video is almost always about being trans or about their own personal life. Or most likely their personal life intersecting with being trans, intersecting with some young adult literature book. So I mean, there's absolutely nothing new to be said from the ContraPoints point of view, because the channel had served its purpose, and this sort of plays into the cancellation of ContraPoints that has happened many times over the last 3 years.
I did check out what happened to PhilosophyTube, and there were two videos on is Nietzsche woke? Is Nietzsche a libtard or whatever it is, or is Nietzsche gay or something like that? 3 videos a year.
Well, PhilosophyTube actually makes videos, though. I mean, it like 3 videos a year, maybe 4, but 3 or 4 videos a year is for a video essayist like that is actually not egregiously like PhilosophyTube actually wants to be doing this job. PhilosophyTube actually wants the job that ContraPoints had. So, you will never know this because these
I mean,
videos are
if
all
you want to
down.
be very, I guess, tongue in cheek, you could say that Philosophy Tube wants to literally be ContraPoints in a
Which
very
actually
grotesque way.
ContraPoints has said that themselves, that Philosophy Tube had this sort of psychosexual desire to become them in this very bizarre. And that was literally a quote that ContraPoints made at one point, or that they insinuated that that was the case. But regardless if this is some psychosexual thing or if this is a genuine desire, ContraPoints, Philosophy Tube is a person who wants to be doing this kind of like edutainment, safe, edgy take on philosophy where I say some egregiously wrong thing in a safe, edgy, draggy way, and then everyone gets really, really upset about it, and I drive the numbers up, and then I do another video about another left-wing idea. This is fine. There's a market for it, obviously, and but there's a larger market for it, is like the trans identity thing, which is probably like, you can get to this that gets a lot darker when you get into that. But when it comes to Philosophy Tube, the problem with these videos are very inorganic. They're forced. They don't have any fresh ideas. They don't touch on any of the issues that we really care about. They're almost all retrospectives, and they take the piss out of, they'll take the piss of like, oh, why we should have open borders, and why this philosopher, why the philosophy of Rawls supports open borders. I'm like, no one cares about that. I mean, to the extent that people care about what Rawls says, the idea that they justify open borders, which is functionally already happening, seems increasingly irrelevant. People aren't looking for justifications for open borders. It's just this completely inorganic thing. They don't touch on a real relevant point that an audience would care about or want to interact with. They're just kind of like content being put out there because there's a market for this kind of campy edutainment stuff. I mean, ContraPoints videos, their original set of videos were like, they were genuinely organic pieces of art. Like, I genuinely laughed at them. Like, they were funny. People forget that they were actually humor in these ContraPoints videos. They could make fun of themselves. And now all of it's just kind of this stilted camp stuff.
I think, like, I've looked at, or I've seen many videos on YouTube over the last year where, since the re-election of Donald Trump, there's been a lot of sort of soul searching among the Democrats as to why they keep on losing men. And one of the reasons, I think, is because the people that they send out to, or the messaging that they have, is always moralizing, stilted, and incredibly as HR friendly, to the point where there's no organic banter actually being said. It's all sort of corporate, corporate slop that anyone with a brain and gonads, as you say, would spit out right away.
And this is the this is what ultimately killed Breadtube. ContraPoints had to become, ContraPoints' fan base was not strictly radical leftists. I would say the majority of their fan base was just Democrats and your ordinary woke shitlibs. They did not want to have a communist revolution. They did not want to how should I put this delicately? They did not want to take a big dump on our greatest ally. They did not want to talk about lobbying organizations that might be pushing for more money to our greatest ally. They wanted to play it safe and safe edgy, but they also wanted to have a bantering kind of back and forth with the rest of the sphere. That is impossible now. There's two kind of camps that they've fallen into, and they've all gone this way. They've either become sort of drama tubers, they've become debate bros that have cultivated like a Discord audience where they can be edgy in a progressive way, kind of like Hassan, and still not talk about the sacred cows of the progressive sacred cows, just constantly reloaded on the conservative sacred cows. or they've kind of become these purveyors of lefty infotainment like Philosophy Tube, or to a lesser degree Thought Slime. These are and even then they're kind of like going back to the mode of doing nostalgia kind of cultural analysis. That's what their audience wants. They're not very relevant politically. A good example of this is like Thought Slime, where they try to make a political video about how the way you need to confront right-wingers is you just need to lock them out of the conversation. Just shut the door. Just don't talk to them ever. And you need to make sure that right-wingers have like a serious social consequence. They'll be fired or they'll be shamed for having this bad opinion, and then just don't let the conversation proceed. There was a 2-hour video they made about that. That shot, like, that's great. And, you know, I'm sure that was very well received. That is an irrelevant sentiment in 2025. They have already fired that shot. They can't lock us out of Twitter. They can't lock us out of Substack. There's no energy to do that. And there's no way that my social circles have already bled out all of the people who want to do that. All of the people who wanted to shame me away from wrongthink have already denounced me in my personal life. They're like, there's nothing more they can do on that front. I mean, they can try to cancel me by spreading lies, but that's pretty much it, you know? And so, okay, like, you know, great. But even Thought Slime's audience understands that that's not like a serious political take. That's just, they wish they had this lever to hurt their enemies, and they don't anymore.
Well, I think to your point about ContraPoints no longer being radical enough for their, or I guess for the new audiences that are growing on social media.
Yeah.
Why there's a question of how Destiny ended up being, you know, kicked out of the nominally left-wing sort of Twitch sphere for being insufficiently radical or socialist, like ideologically socialist or communist or whatever.
Yeah, but they have a different market. They play to very different audiences.
Well, I think actually I don't think that's entirely true, because the sort of online left sort of I guess the online left audience is ideologically a whole lot more, there's a whole lot more groupthink to them, where if you say the wrong, you have to be, first off, you have to be, you know, on the ball with every single policy position that, you know, this sort of soft left, every soft left policy position you have to be on board with, or else you get canceled, like Philosophy Tube, or I'm sorry, like ContraPoints. But I think the left wanted to be more radical than what YouTube wanted to allow, which is how you end up with rogue agents like Hassan, you know, platforming pirates and doing the whole Death to America thing. And there's a huge market for it. And that market seems to have a whole lot of crossover. The more communistic and radical left audience has a lot more crossover with ContraPoints, or else this cancellation thing wouldn't actually be an issue of contention.
Well, ContraPoints is left with a foot in both camps.
Yeah,
that's why they can't. That's why they can't exist, right? The thing that got ContraPoints canceled, and I don't know how I know this. I guess I do know how I know this, but there are two things that got ContraPoints canceled. First of all, they made kind of like a conciliatory statement, like they're good people on both sides when it came to current unnamed conflict happening at the behest of our current greatest ally. You know, they made a tepid statement on that made it seem like, oh wow, maybe there are two sides to this issue. You know, it's just a big tragedy, which of course their audience would not accept.
I remember there's like an insufficient casualty number quote that ContraPoints cited. You know, insufficiently using their platform to support Palestinian causes, which, like,
and their audience really cares about that. But then they made an unforced. So that was the forced error, right? Because ContraPoints eventually had to say something about that. Their funders don't want them to turn into Hassan anti-Israel, like an anti-Israelite. They know they'll lose a lot of money if they do that, because a lot of the classic, a lot of their support, I imagine, comes from these classic Democrats who just are woke and don't actually want to get into like global anti-Zionism hardcore. So that they were forced into that era. But the real thing, the unforced era that canceled ContraPoints was that the DSA was having this big meeting, and ContraPoints said, gee guys, I support the feeling, but I don't really want to be part of your weird Marxist church. And it's just like, you can just imagine how that's such a millennial attitude. That's the kind of thing that like would sound really
Gen
cool.
X almost.
Well, no, excellent. Look, both ContraPoints and I are at the same age, and we are both on the cusp of Gen X millennial. And we're the spoony one generation, right? like that's just
Generation
the kind of
Spoon.
Like, Generation Spoony one, right? It's just the kind of like snarky, I don't want to be part of your group, Daria attitude you'd expect from an older millennial. But like, no one's here for that anymore, and no one wants to hear about how people who are taking time out of their day to launch. And I you know this as well. Launching real world activities is a thankless endeavor. It is. I mean, look, I'm so glad that we're doing it, but it takes so long. And there are so many things that can go wrong, and sometimes they don't even turn out to be that great. You know, like you put on, you end up having to have speakers that aren't necessarily as prepared as they could be. You know, people are like, "Oh, well, it wasn't as good as your last one." You hear that, and you're just like, you end up taking haircuts.
Okay, so first off, who said that, and where do they live? Because we have OGC men everywhere nowadays.
Yeah, no. I've had to slap together some speaker rosters, and I didn't vet everyone involved, and not in the major events. I'm just saying, you have to work with what you're given, right? But it's like you hear this, and like then you get like this, like, oh wow, you're part of a Marxist church. I mean, I almost like I as someone who does in real world. In real life organizing, like I wanted to punch ContraPoints for saying that, and they're on the opposite side. Like, I should want to see them fail, right? It's like watching some like bitchy conscientious objector on the opposite end of the war and be like, I know you're helping me by demoralizing your own side, but I still want to smack you for being like this bitchy demoralizer. And like but that's just like, that's the thing. And the problem with ContraPoints is that they wanted to be ContraPoints in the 2000s and in the 90s. They didn't want to be this phenomenon where like half of the left decided to like tune out and follow them. Right? Like, they didn't want to be like the leader of a cult, but that's what they ended up with, because they weren't making videos in the 2000s, or not that you could do this in the 1990s, but they weren't making videos in the 1990s, and they got way more popular than they ordinarily would be.
It's strange. So I guess there are the elements of what the creators want, what the meta is, and what the audience wants. I guess
Exactly.
those are the three pools that. And I guess there's also an element of self-sabotage where, content creators get burned out, like Innuendo Studios or whatever, who, after only producing a minuscule amount of content each year, just lives off of Patreon, sluggishly,
and grifts his audience.
Grifts himself into obscurity.
I mean, he's gonna have a hard time recovering from that blow to his credibility. For those who don't know, he essentially claimed to be broke, asked his followers to give this obscene amount of money to them, and then went on vacation.
Yeah,
with no promise of future videos, with the like, I might get home from vacation and decide I don't want to do this anymore. Well, and this is not a response. I mean, obviously I'm saying this not having made a piece of content for a month, because I literally just plugged my microphone in for the first time 40 minutes ago. But this is I don't know, like that credibility is just, it's gonna have a hard time recovering it.
Have you followed what's happened to Boogie 2988?
Well, he's interesting because he was never political. He was definitely a hero of YouTube 1.0 or Internet 2.0.
I guess riffing off of the scam, like the scammer liar revealed, he faked having cancer for so many months.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Boogie 2988 is really, again, definitively not Breadtube, right? But I mean, this is a larger question about what do you do with this entire class of millennials who just ended up frittering their lives away, and then they're resorting to grifting and lying in their early middle age. And I don't, there's a larger societal discussion about that.
Well, I think what I was trying to get at is, Boogie is not a political figure, but as far as a content creator of, from days gone by, who hasn't aged gracefully and has in fact devolved into this sort of gremlin who is just hobbling by with no real skills, nothing in terms of content or like interesting stuff going on about him outside of the fact that he's a grifting gremlin, lolcow. But I feel like the inability to age gracefully on the internet is how Destiny ended up in a worse place than JonTron, who, for all intents and purposes, ended up winning. JonTron's happily married, still a darling on the internet. He's not quite what he was. But
so is PewDiePie, right?
PewDiePie, yep.
I mean, Carl Benjamin arguably is in the same crowd, right? Of people who, this is a perennial problem for the left, is that they can't figure out how to age.
Yeah.
Especially the white men. they can't figure it out. It's impossible for them to continence.
Well, I do think that there are some motifs to how they age. First off, going bald and growing the millennial beard. The second is a certain affectation in terms of tone or accent or whatever it is. How they speak in a very polished, manicured way. In terms of the politics that they adopt, I guess they get less ideological and more empathetic is the general trajectory that they end up going.
They end up being kind of like soft boys, or they tune out, right? That's the two ways to go.
Well, route number 2 really has no future, or it's a very, very ugly, decrepit future.
Well, this is the great question with PhilosophyTube and ContraPoints, is what happens when they really hit middle age. I mean, I don't know, right? Because that is old age comes from everybody, and no one's figured out how to be age gracefully as a trans woman is a very, very difficult proposition, even if I divorce any kind of moral consideration from it.
Well, there's, I guess, also the question of, what was it? There's the question of what does it actually mean to, I guess, mature as a content consumer? Because in terms of who the audiences ended up following after the Great Awakening, there's the sort of new younger generation that just goes to like Twitch and just watches these like brainless Hassan fans that become that just go back to I guess what I'm trying to say is, what do the aging, Gen X millennials, what do they actually watch in terms of content? Like, how have they matured? Because
Well, I mean, you mean the audience of ContraPoints? Well,
sure.
In some sense, I think this is, in some sense, they just haven't. And Hassan and Vosh in particular, Vosh and people like Keffels have cultivated this audience of what must be older or middle millennials, just in a perpetual state of arrested development. That's a very large audience. And they've completely developed Discord brain, and they seem to be completely detached from what anyone else is talking or thinking about. And that's kind of a sad thing, but there's nowhere else to go. As for the rest of the left, it's rough. I mean, the thing that was so ironic about this is if this was the 1990s or the 80s or the 70s, it would be so easy to kind of become a leader as sort of a middle-aged white man of a group of leftists who wanted to make a new community or build a community library or get into labor politics or get into any of these things. But all of these avenues are cut off because of the fact that they are locked in kind of this pattern of radicalism and lifestyle leftism.
Well, one thing I noticed about the millennial breadtubers, like Thought Slime, is that there's a certain, I guess, there's a certain trap in being, the confessional model of producing content, speaking from the heart, exposing all of your neuroses and trying to come to some greater understanding publicly, to where they end up looking old and pathetic.
Well, that's Boogie 2988's problem.
Yeah.
He was the master of the confessional in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
That's what made him a thing, right?
Yeah, his whole thing was, I've got things pretty rough, but I'll lose the weight, or I'll come through on this cancer thing, and never loses weight, never gets rid of the cancer, wasted money on hookers and drugs, and there's only so long that can actually keep going.
Yeah, once you get grifted by those 3 times, then
I mean, there's only so many times you can fake cancer before you become the cancer.
Yeah.
All right, so we're coming up on the 1 hour mark.
Sure thing.
Something of a hard cutoff. This live stream that I usually have is usually something of a pregame for Old Glory Club's Pony Express Radio Live.
Okay.
So everyone watching this, tune into Pony Radio Express. It should be starting pretty soon. Dave, you've had quite an odyssey in your trek across the border and back. Do you have any any words of wisdom for someone who's a little bit more transient, might end up moving?
I just want to encourage everyone to do more things in real life. The only problem is just like, how do you, well, first of all, the Old Glory Club is doing that. And if you're so inclined and an American, I highly recommend that. I think what we've learned in the last 10 years, to put this all in retrospect, is that like online things rot. They rot if they're not connected to the real world. And, I've been a big promoter of basket weaving, a big promoter of the OGC, separate organizations, and I've had a difficult time making them work together, but you can do either one, but you just can't build your foundation in the online world, and work as much as possible to integrate the two of them and find people that you can actually trust. I'll say this, there are so few people that are political and public that you actually could trust as friends. And I think that the people who are affiliated with the OGC, the people like Aaron McIntyre, and all the fine gentlemen who come to our conferences, like those are people who we could disagree with each other, but we're not going to backstab each other. And that's kind of a phenomenal thing, even if we are relatively smaller content creators.
In terms of, I guess one last thing I wanted to throw in, your old Discord, or I'm sorry, your old Telegram chat sends its regards. And
shoot. I think I deleted. So
kind of
people, I had to delete. I'm in the process of deleting. I had a bunch of Discords. So I keep getting banned from Discord because people start, like, trolls start, like the old Telegram communities, they start developing trolls. And I can't have people like posting violent and pornographic stuff on a forum that I own. But I remember this meme was pretty awesome. Thanks, guys, for making it.
Well, they actually have all sorts of. This is part of a sticker pack. Let's see. Good old Dave. This one. This classic. Oh, I thought I'd drop by and oh my! It's surprising how many interesting figures you were able to collect in that.
That's time. Interesting. I fully embrace my role as the old guy in these circles. I think that's where I'm kind of becoming. But as we welcome a new generation, and I think the challenge is just going to be to get a new generation of Zoomers to do something productive and not just get sucked into the brain rot, and still be aware of these political problems, because I think that they're needed.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Dave.
No problem.
And I'd love to see you, love to see you producing content, your live streams, your video essays. I do have your Thomas Carlyle self-spec saved for my next road trip. So
okay. Well, I made a longer one recently that was very popular about the decline of the left, which I didn't think would be a hit, but was way more way better received than the esoteric one. But thanks for having me on, Clausenton, and I'll catch you guys later. I won't want to keep you late for the OGC stream.
All right, well, thanks everybody for watching, and tune in to next Thursday, 7 p.m. EST. I'm having Will Tanner on to discuss the geopolitics of Rhodesia. It should be a pretty fun stream. I'll see you guys then.
See ya.